You're listening to the Build, Buy, Sell Agency Podcast, and this episode is part of our Agency Leader Series. My name is Shane Perkins, and I'm best known for leading acquisitions, deal making, and financing for Unite Digital, a unique and growing agency network specifically positioned to serve mid-market clients across the U.S. And I'm talking to mid-size agency owners across the marketing and advertising spectrum to uncover their top mind shifts, lessons learned, and insights that help them grow and manage their agency, as well as give you a chance to learn what partner and deal opportunities they are looking for right now that you can reach out about to explore possibilities to work together. Let's get into today's episode. Welcome to the Build, Buy, Sell Agency Podcast. I'm your host, Shane Perkins, and our guest for today is Paul Pomeroy. He is the president at Aloysius Butler & Clark. We'll call it AB&C from now on, which is one of the largest full-service agencies in the Mid-Atlantic. So, Paul, where specifically is the agency located right now?
So first of all, Shane, I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you and good to talk with you. We were founded in Wilmington, Delaware. That was kind of the corporate headquarters, but we have a pretty big presence in Philadelphia, and also we have an office in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania. So we have those three locations. We have some folks that work remotely as well.
And your role as president, did you grow up into that role, or what's been your involvement there?
I've been at the agency for 20 years, and I kind of broke into it as being a on the account side, and then a lot of what my focus had been from the onset of my career at agency had been focused on revenue generation and business development. And so a lot of what I did and continue to do has been about growth through organic growth through business development, growth through acquisition, and that kind of thing. So it's really, my role now has been a pretty natural evolution of where I began 20 years ago.
And how does that take you to a president role? Because I guess I could hear of when someone has a president title, it can mean different things. Typically, they're in operations, so I wasn't too sure where your involvement was.
Interesting. So when we, our CEO and president, when they were, for the majority of the time that I was at AB&C, it was one role. And the way we ended up doing it was when he ended up retiring and he was one of the founders, we had grown to a point where we were pretty big, and the way we broke, and everybody does it their own way, but the way we broke up the role is the president position ended up being more of the externally facing revenue generation, how do you grow kind of role. Our CEO is more of the kind of internal focus on culture, focus on operation, focus, that kind of thing. And we're very fortunate. We have a partner group of 4, and our CFO is incredibly engaged in both operations and the financial side of the business. And the 4th partner is our chief creative officer. So we have a nice, well-rounded team in terms of how we're able to break out the roles.
So it sounds like you're definitely more on the biz dev side. So I'd love to get into a mind shift that you shared with me, which is, sales is not a dirty word. How is that a mind shift for you?
Well, it's interesting. So when it was a mind shift for me personally, as it relates to this particular industry, and the background is when I was my first career out of school was working for a wholesale food distributorship. So it had nothing to do with advertising. And my job at the ripe old age of 21 was to walk in the back door at restaurants at any time of the day and try to get the chef's attention and tell them how cheaply I could give them a 50-pound bag of sugar, right? So it was really a pretty, hand-to-hand combat in terms of kind of a sales orientation. And, a lot of my training in my early days was really very focused on that kind of transactional sales background. And then when I got into the advertising business, now granted, this is 20 years ago, to keep in mind, there were no business development in the ad world was definitely not what it is today. I mean, there were no sales. I can't go a day without getting 9 to 44 emails from the next, business development consultant or, marketing automation software geared towards business. But back in the day, there were none. And there was almost kind of an attitude among agencies that were like, well, if if you're good enough, you don't have to sell yourself. The work comes to you. And it always seemed to me as a guy who grew up in the first part of his career all about, knocking on the doors, to kind of sit back and wait for the knocks to come your way. It didn't make sense. And it was something where when I got in the industry, I started off as an account rep. And, for me, a big thing was, wait, what else can we be doing to fill a pipeline in a way that maybe other people aren't doing it? So, that to me was kind of my own personal, orientation in this business that, saying, hey, I'm a salesperson in advertising was not a dirty word. And then it became really kind of a part of our internal culture as we sort of grew the agency as we went on. Now it's different. I mean, now there are a lot of people who, most agencies now have either a specific biz dev person or a team but it was a little different 20 years ago.
So what was the transformation that happened in terms of the impact you were making then versus the type of impact you're trying to make now?
That's a great question. And I think it is the thing that has been the biggest transformation, I think, for both me in this industry, but the agency as it relates to what you had just asked, is business development and revenue growth is a part of our internal culture that's an expectation across the board, whether you are an account person or a creative or in accounting or whatever, or the first person who picks up the phone when somebody calls over to the agency. Everybody knows that they have a role and a responsibility to being part of how the agency grows and develops. But we've really tried to do it in a way where it feels like a fun and engaging and an energizing part of anybody's day as it relates to the work that we do in the business here. And it really, that part of what we do allows people to stretch their minds and their abilities and recognize different ways that maybe if it's not part of their core part of their day, like me, if most of my day is business development, for other people who get involved in the process, it's a great way for them to kind of flex their muscles in terms of the contributions that they can make in terms of helping the agency grow. And it has been a contributing factor without a doubt. And I think how we've grown, over the 20 years that I've been fortunate enough to be at the agency.
How have you been able to personally help drive growth? And if you're willing to share some numbers in there, that's great. But what I'm looking for is something actionable that a fellow agency leader or owner can take and say, wow, this is some good biz dev insight.
We have folks at the agency who just haven't spent their entire lives in the ad business. So I came from a world where sales and relationships and how to make that type of connection was a part of my background. And then I really internalized the advertising part. I think a lot of folks, there's a real benefit, I think, to having people in an ad agency environment who have lived in environments and in industries outside of advertising, especially in the business development standpoint. Mm-hmm. So from an actionable standpoint, I think that when agencies think about business development teams, they often think about, well, maybe this person's had agency experience, so I got to look for them. And I think we really benefited from having people in our organization that understand the relationship side and the process of how to develop a sales program outside of just the world of advertising. And it's been a big part of understanding how we grow. And I think that's when I got there, I was the 21st employee. We're 90 employees now. So, I mean, I think it's not something that is you flick the switch overnight, but it was kind of culturally became a part of how we decided it was a good way for us to grow.
In terms of where the agency had started, when you were there at 20 people, it sounds like what you had shared with me prior to our call was it was a design shop. Was that right? And then where did you take it to now?
When we began and when I got to the agency originally, I think we were very proud of the role that we played, which was we were largely, a Delaware-based, maybe, fourth or fifth largest agency in Delaware that was very proud of the fact that we did great design work. And I think we decided that in order to, in agency business, you kind of, my philosophy is you aim for a plateau. And when you get that to that plateau, you strategically figure out how you get to the next plateau. And I think we had probably plateaued in terms of where we were at in terms of being a shop that was largely did good design work. And I think it was time for us when we wanted to hit that next plateau, really orient ourselves around how do we become more of a value to our clients by not just being reactionary to their needs when they had something that was transactional, and becoming more of a strategic consultancy that provided excellence in terms of strategy and design and execution across the board. And so that became sort of part of the internal thinking that led us to get to those next plateaus of development from an agency standpoint. And moving from thinking of yourself as a design shop to actually being a consultancy begins with building that momentum internally as kind of an aspirational goal, and then working to that next plateau. And I think, we certainly have done that over the 20 years, but I think it was when we'd hit that plateau, 15 or so years ago, it was time to move to the next one. And that was a big part of how we thought about ourselves, but to think about ourselves that way to get to where we wanted to be. Where
was that plateau at? I mean, what was the scenario in the agency? I mean, in terms of, did you have a wide base of clients? How many employees were you at?
I think that's such a great question. I think you have to keep in mind too, given the fact that we were based in Delaware, we were beginning to bump up against the confines of our own geography. And in order to, as we sort of were looking and needing to kind of go outside of our wonderful world of our home base, it was important for us to be able to offer the type of things that clients needed as we look to broaden our reach in terms of not only what we were providing, but where we were going and who we were competing against. So it was important for us to recognize that if you want to go and be a regional player, you're going to compete against regional agencies, and you're going to have to think of yourself in a way that gets you to that next plateau where you're playing in that kind of field. And I think a big part of the impetus for doing so was, one, just a desire to keep bettering and broadening ourselves, but in terms of who we were, where we were prospecting, who we were pitching against, what type of agency we wanted to be, getting that broader base of client required thinking a little bit, a little bit progressively.
So when you hit that plateau, how many employees were you at?
I'm trying to remember back then. We were probably maybe in the 30s range, okay. And it was kind of like, hey, it was a conscious decision, and not just me and not just management, but it was really an agency-wide conscious decision to be like, hey, all right, let's take it to the next plateau. We probably could stay capped at a good 30 whatever person agency and provide good work and be happy. But I think that the agency in total felt like we had the opportunity and we had the talent to go to the next plateau. And I think we were probably in that employee range, if that makes sense.
So when you went regionally, is that where you're at now, or did you hit that plateau? So you were local, then you went regional, then you went national.
It's interesting. So part of us identifying where the best growth opportunities required us looking a bit inwardly to say, well, what industries do we feel we're particularly strong at, and where is the market for that industry base? And we were always regional. I mean, just a lot of the work happened to be focused in Delaware, but we had experience in a few key niches that really allowed us to actually move almost nationally first and then back to where we are, which is a national agency that's also really hyper regional, depending upon the niches we were in. And to be specific, back, it must have been maybe a decade ago or 12 years ago, there were not a ton of agencies that really focused on healthcare. It wasn't viewed as being really sexy work in the ad business, but we had some really strong experience, not non-pharma, but hospital health system. And we had some experience there, and we were like, hey, let's leverage that and shoot for opportunities that are outside of our region. And we would pick up work that was out to the west and up and down the East Coast, and we leveraged the experience that we had, and that was a good opportunity for us to kind of get to the next plateau. And the quality of the work that we were doing there led us to other industries that enabled us to create even more of a stake in the ground in the Philadelphia marketplace where we are now. So I think that kind of that plateau of being sort of that hyper regional and national-ish kind of leading agency is something that we always kind of had in our mind, but we knew that it was going to take steps to get there.
And how did you expand? Did you go through partnerships, acquisitions?
One of the things that has always been a hallmark of our agency that I feel very proud of, and I'd like to think that we really are this way, is that we don't really have big egos, and we're not big kind of prima donna-ish kind of folks. We play really nice in the sandbox, and that has led us to form, even when we had a client who said, well, hey, but we'd really like for you to work with these people. We'd say, sure, we're happy to work with them. And we figured, hey, good partnerships lead to good work. So a lot of the growth that we had came as a byproduct of establishing relationships outside of our own walls to find people that we had common ground with, even if they were quasi-competitors, and find a way to work with them to look for other opportunities. And there have been a couple times when we've had partnerships like that it ended up being a situation where we kind of merged together ultimately. And we've done that a couple times. We've been able to grow organically where we've had to hire folks. We've been able to grow as well by having good partners that we've gotten to know over time, and over time saying, hey, wouldn't maybe we'd be better, stronger together.
So what does that mean at a tactical level? When you're pursuing partnerships, what are you doing to go do it, and why? And are they kind of a sole owner that you find that's doing some work?
There's never been a real rhyme or reason to it. Sometimes we will be in a client would like for us to partner, and maybe they have for example, maybe a media agency that they love, and we do media because we're a full service agency, but we're like, okay, you're happy doing that, we'll work together. We know our lane, we'll do your lane, we'll work collaboratively, and there have been situations where that's built out to us working with that partner on other accounts, and that's been fruitful for both because we get a chance to work together, and everybody wins, the client wins type of thing. And there have been other situations where maybe it's been an industry specific knowledge base where we were partnering with them, and then even though we would be quasi competitive, meaning there was a almost overlapping services, but over time it just sort of felt like there was a good rapport that we were having with the other agency. There have been a couple times where we've established that kind of rapport, even though we were kind of quasi competitors, where we decided, hey, maybe we should come together and as one and make it more of either a formal partnership or an actual acquisition. And that has happened a couple times in the time that I've been at the agency, and it's definitely been part of our growth strategy.
Has it been part of the growth strategy where it's been you've been able to make significant revenue jumps from those acquisitions?
They've all been a little bit different. Probably we've done things where we've worked with folks and we've brought over maybe 10, 15 people through kind of an acquisition coming together, but other times when it's been an opportunistic opportunity where maybe it's only been 2 or 3 people. And each time it's been more about the people and the promise, and it's been solely about the revenue. Now the revenue comes, and if we're able to retain the clients and grow those clients due to kind of more combined firepower, well, then that's great. And that's been, it's been beneficial, but most of the times that we've done it, it's been about, at the end of the day, our industry is really the people business naturally, and you know that well. And each time it's been more about a connection with the people and the promise, and it's just been about kind of almost a cash or an account grab. And I think that's why, for the most part, they worked out well for us.
What are some action steps or at least a mindset you could recommend other agency owners that are on a 30 people wanting to grow? Maybe they're looking at a few partners that they have for potential acquisition. From your experience, what's some advice you would recommend to that listener?
A couple things came to mind, and these are kind of agency specific things that then move a little bit more into, well, how does that relate to ongoing partnerships or acquisitions or whatnot. I think we've one thing that we learned early on was it's really important to be true to who you are as an agency and have some form of a true north. And so, for example, we always knew that we were dedicated to being a full service agency and unapologetic generalist in terms of the industries that we work with. And over the time that I've been around, I've heard every doomsday scenario from an agency consultant saying, if you don't specialize, within 40 days, you're going to go out of business. And then, 3 years later, it's if you're not a generalist within 40 days, you're going to go out of business. I think it's really important for agency people to stay true to who they are, know what their DNA make up, that their DNA is, and then be true to that. I also think that tends to open up your mind to what type of partnerships make sense and what type of acquisitions make sense. Because at the end of the day, what you bring into your organization has to be aligned with sort of who you are from at the core of your entity. Another thing that kind of came to mind is that one of the things that has been transformational for me, and I learned this among many, many other things from our founder and former president and CEO, is that if you were really understand and internalize what a client's situation and their needs are, and not just from a day-to-day standpoint, but what's at the core of their being and what's at the core of their individual lives almost, you have more empathy for what they go through. And what I mean by that is when a client chooses an agency, oftentimes it could be a pretty high stakes decision for them. Not necessarily always make or break to their career, but it could be something where if a client makes a decision on an agency, it's a big deal for them and it needs to go well. And clients are like us, they have mortgages and kids and they have real life situations. And I think understanding and internalizing how important that is to how you approach the job is something I think that makes you a better agency. It's also helped us identify what type of partners make sense. So kind of identifying a shared value system, I think, makes a lot of sense in terms of recognizing what type of either partnership or acquisitions make sense.
Any insight on the typical deal structure that you guys would look at with these partners?
It makes sense to be open to a variety of scenarios. And I think we've gone through, with the acquisitions that we've gone through, a variety of different scenarios. At the end of the day, they need to be mutually beneficial for both sides. And while each of them have maybe been structured a bit differently, we've tried to historically build it in a way where there's a win-win for each side, where it doesn't look as if in each of the scenarios our agency's been the one that's been kind of bringing on the other team, but we really try to, and it's again a reflection of how we think about people and relationships. We really try to make it feel as if it's not some sort of a power play move. It's something where it's really almost a merging of equals and kind of rolling up into our brand. And the financials around each have varied in terms of direct get is from each side, but it's really more gets down to a shared set of values, and then the sense that each side feels as if they've won.
So it sounds like, at least in those deal structures, they didn't want to really sell out. They wanted to join into your vision and be part of a greater team.
Interesting thing, and you know this business better than I do, and there are a lot of different ways to go. For us, for the most part, one of the things I had mentioned a couple of minutes back is, for us, it was the deals that we've made have not been about just the revenue. It's really been about how do the people and what those people bring to the table in terms of their expertise and their experience and their values. How does that match up with what we do, and how does that help us grow and benefit the clients that we have, and plus the clients that they bring over. So I really do think at the core of each thing that we've done, it's been more about the people coming over. And while if there were some owners of those companies who were looking to sort of phase themselves out over either a short period of time or a long period of time, that's where sort of you trying to structure in a way that it's a win-win for all involved comes into play. But it's been, like I said, it's been more about bringing together good people than it's just been about almost like a cash or account grab, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Not to say that there aren't situations in mergers where that that is the priority, either because it just is or it needs to be. But for the ones that we've done, it's been more the way I described it. And Shane, going back for us, it had more to do with kind of what we were doing to get to each one of those plateaus. So it was always everything that we've done. While I'm making it sound very kumbaya, which was it really, there was a strategic orientation around it, right? It had to do with for the AB&C side. It really is kind of like, well, how do these people, how's this move help us get to whatever our next plateau is? We try not to, as an agency, be like hey, we want a big account. We have to hire 10 people. Oh, we lost it. Now we have to fire 12. It's just, we've never been that way. And that's where a lot of it goes back to the orientation around the people. But even with the moves that we've made that have been acquisitions, it's really been about what do we do to kind of grow into that next plateau.
I see what you're saying. So what's the plateau you guys are hitting now?
We have found ourselves, and not winning them all, but we definitely find ourselves pitching accounts that are, a little out of our weight class. We're punching a little bit out of our weight class purposefully. I think that what ends up happening is we're fortunate enough to find ourselves in opportunities both through our proactive efforts, but even if we are on a few radars where people are saying, hey, would you like to pitch in this? And we know maybe we know we're capable of it, but I think that we're pitching against some real heavyweight national agencies, which is wonderful. And yeah, we win some and we lose some, but I think for us, the next plateau has to do with how do we remain true to everything that got us to where we are. And that means, we are as proud of our $25,000 client as we are proud of our $7 million client, right? It's sort of that we really are. And it's not just lip service, we really are. So we don't envision ourselves being the type of shop that is only going to just go after those big clients and forget everybody else. We look to remain true to all the type of clients that we service, but getting into those type of those pitches that kind of really where we're competing against truly recognized national agencies, something that we're finding ourselves in more of them. We win some, we lose some, but like I said, it helps make us sharp for the opportunities that come our way, and not just from a business development standpoint, but from a service delivery standpoint. It forces us to be sharp in everything we do. And going back to the topic of acquisition, it also helps us think about, well, as we continue to grow into that next plateau, what type of partners do we want to work with? What type of partners do we need to come together with? And it's exciting times, interesting because of how quick and how dynamic our industry is, as you well know. But it's never a dull moment.
So I guess the last thing on that is I'm wondering why not just stay partnering? Why go to acquire?
There have been, and to be clear, we definitely have partners that are just partners, and we will call them and they'll call us depending on a situational basis. But to answer your question, there are those times when if you have a partner and when you have a partner, they have their own obligations that are unrelated to whatever you may need or want at that particular time. And so when you officially come together, you really you're in the same boat 100% of the time instead of 80% of the time or 30% of the time. And there are times when it just makes sense for it to be a kind of a 100% commitment as opposed to the one-off commitment.
So let's go into the agency's growth goals over the next 3 years. What are you guys focusing on?
I think that for us, we've really, and it's odd to say now, having been here for 20 years, we've always wanted to grow slowly and steadily as a company. I mentioned earlier, it's not like we want to hit that, hit the big one and we need 15 people and then I don't think we'll ever be the agency that has 3 clients and then you lose one. You're like, well, we got to let a third of our base go. We really do have a very strong dedication to developing within what we see as being both our core industry niches as well as our marketing specialties. And the growth for us continues in a way to be not much different now in 2019 than it was in 2009, which is identify the plateau that you want to shoot for. Think of it aspirationally. Understand where you need to go to find the right opportunities to get you there, and the people, services, the partners that you need to kind of grow there, and just keep working it until you do. I mean, we pitch. Like I said, we win some, we lose some, and I think when we win some, we're like, hey, that we're on our way to that next plateau. And when we don't, we're like, well, what do we need to do to better ourselves to be able to get to that point? I think self-exploration in a way has led us to know where we want to go over these many years and sort of what path we need to take to get there. And it has so much to do with our people and the type of people that would be good partners from a client standpoint and good outside partners for us to work with in terms of, to growing our account base. And, more specifically, if you had asked me, if we'd been doing this 5 years ago, I probably would have said, get to 75 people and X revenue. I think at this point now, being a real good, true mid-sized agency with a good critical mass of people and clients and expertise, a lot of our growth now is going to come from what are those opportunities that allow us to bring the greatest value to the right type of client. And the goal structure for me now has to do with, are people happy? Are they excited and challenged by what they're doing day in and day out? Are we working with clients that are excited to work with us? And there's a mutual respect there. And that, I think, will lead to the type of growth we want. And let me just also say, as a trained in sales guy for 30 years, aggressive growth from that standpoint is something that we're never going to back down on. But a lot of it has to do with matching that with recognizing what makes our people happy here and what's the best value we bring to clients.
That's been interesting. Just seeing different agencies saying, we want to grow fast, but we have a slow. We want to grow so we don't get out of control. Because that's kind of what it sounds like you want to do. You want to grow as fast as possible, but you don't want to lose control of the quality that you've built inside the agency.
And what's interesting? If we were to talk to everybody, not just me, you talk to everybody at our agency, they would probably, and folks who've been here for a while would probably say, these last couple of years have been pretty frenetic, and they really have been. I mean, I wouldn't say runaway growth, and nor would I say uncontrolled growth, but there were definitely, as we really have been building out the offices, growing pains is not the right word, but probably more, in an exciting way, accelerated growth. But it doesn't change the fact that the mission that we have is to think of it in terms of being steady and controlled with good people you like to work with, that you consider friends, and that you feel like you're in it for them. It's really a value system that I feel like is part of our growth. And I think that's what I've learned to appreciate more in the time that I've been with the agency, is that if growth is tied to a value system as opposed to just kind of the quickest cash grab that you can get, well, then your approach to revenue growth is a little bit more genuine than it is just kind of take anything as it comes. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but I think in a lot of ways it was has been a part of what has made the agency what it's been, at least in the 20 years that I've been able to experience it.
It does. So, I mean, in terms of that, what could our agency owner, if let's say they're just focused on revenue right now, they're focused at they're 30 to 60 people, they want to grow, they want to take the next level, they don't want to get out of control, but they have some aggressive numbers they want to hit. What kind of advice would you say to that?
The one thing, and I've really put it kind of in two general areas that we've talked with, and I think that they're, again, for in your business, there's both things that I think you can appreciate. One is, I really do firmly believe, and again, my perspective is biased by my background. I think that if you have in your organization a point person who's truly dedicated to business development and appreciation of business development as the professional craft that it is, doesn't make a difference if that person even comes from an agency background. But if they are dedicated to that craft of business development and they think of it in terms of as a professional discipline that requires development and buy-in And, and some of this now seems more obvious than maybe it would have even 10 years ago. But I really do think that the right fit from a business development standpoint for an organization is whatever matches what the internal goals and culture of an agency is. So I think trying to think of that as not necessarily having to be, well, I need the business development person maybe was at it. No, it just could be a good person who gets business development as a craft. And I think that is really, it can put somebody on the right trajectory from a growth standpoint. The other thing is what we've sort of talked about, and again, what you know a lot about it, is finding the right partners and the acquisitions that make sense. And, I've had friends in other agencies that have been incredibly successful by exploring acquisitions via somebody who's kind of out there being that person for them and looking for the right opportunities. Mm-hmm. And to have that kind of person out there who provides that sort of service for an agency can be incredibly helpful in terms of just understanding an agency's growth goals and how an acquisition can help out. And I think those are two ways that, on top of the kind of the things we talked about partnership, that I think are really important considerations for agencies in terms of thinking about how they grow in a strategic way over time.
So if they're just focused on revenue, it sounds like they need to take a step back. I mean, they're probably thinking about making sure their employees are happy and clients are doing well. Yeah. But looking back at what you guys have done, what are some final words on not relevant to revenue that they could take away if they're looking at growing from your biz dev perspective? It sounds like making sure you're very clear on the vision of your company.
Absolutely, and I think vision is essential, and understanding. So the vision as it relates to a goal orientation, 100%. And I think matching that with the right approach culturally is so important. Again, one of the biggest lessons I've learned, and I think anybody who's been doing this for a while ultimately gets it, that everything comes down to the people. And it just thinking about, and this is coming from a salesperson, just thinking about making the next buck or how do you close the next deal. At the end of the day, it won't be enough to get you to the level that you want to go. At some point, you're going to hit a point of diminishing returns if the strategic approach to revenue generation isn't tied back to culturally what matches with your internal people and culturally matches the type of partners that you look to work with on the outside, whether that be another strategic partner in your industry or the right type of client. And at the end of the day, you can win an account, and if those other things are misaligned, you're talking about revenue in a short period of time, as opposed to, I think, what we tended to be fortunate to have, which is good long-term relationships with clients and employees, fortunately. And I've really grown to appreciate it. As a sales guy, learning to appreciate just how valuable that people side of the business is to sustained revenue growth.
Do you think that agency owners, for the most part, they get it? They usually have their stuff worked out, or do you think that this is still pretty applicable for them?
The interesting thing about that question is how much the industry changes now on what feels like a daily basis. I feel like you have to be thinking. I think, by the way, I think most agencies would like to believe it, and in some way, shape, or form probably do innately understand that it's a people business and we have to be smart about how we grow. And all the things that we've talked about, I think most agency people would probably innately believe that they get that. And I think for the most part, we all do. The challenge is obviously trying to find a way to put all the pieces together. But the ever-changing nature of our industry has made it such that if you're not constantly thinking about those issues, it's very quickly to fall behind and find that the kind of the approach to how you get that kind of revenue is maybe based on something you were doing, an approach you were doing a year ago that now almost doesn't work anymore. For the first 15 years that we grew, the industry, while it was evolving, was certainly not evolving the way it has been the last 5. And it's just been, keeping up with that change has been, in terms of how it ties to a growth strategy, has been is a full-time job.
All right, so 20 years with the agency. how do you keep that vision in alignment? So it's kind of like, the years going by, you kind of you get into your zone, you're on biz dev or agency growth, and you kind of drift away from the vision. How do you guys make sure you stay? And then how can the agency owner apply that?
So I will tell you, it's the answer I'm about to give you will almost sound like I'm saying two different things, but I do really believe that at the end of the day, you do need one person at the agency, and it's their primary job to kind of be thinking about it all the time. In the earlier days of me being at the agency, I put a lot of that on my shoulders for no reason, and it wasn't even based on ego or control or anything like that. It just did something where it's kind of like, well, that's kind of my job, and my job is to figure it out, and that's what I would try to do. Like everybody else had a job, but I think the way that it works now that's a bit different is that it's such an involved process of understanding, collecting perspectives from people in the agency who have an idea or have a big picture vision on where the agency should go and what's important and relationship. It's really much more of an inclusive process now, where shaping of the future, as opposed to it kind of being almost a tunnel vision of one person, has become something that's such an integrated part of what we do. Mm-hmm. And it's not to say that there shouldn't be one, and I really am a very strong believer in the fact that one person should be constantly thinking day in and day out about revenue today, revenue in a week and a month, but revenue in a year and 10 years out. But I think having that process feel inclusive is something that I think is what's really helped us, and I think it's valuable to the overall approach that an agency can take in terms of thinking about their future growth strategies.
I guess be on the same page with everybody about the vision. Do you structure out like quarterly meets, or do you have some other type of frequency that would be helpful now?
Yeah, and we had always been a pretty flat, organic kind of organization. We still kind of are, but probably about maybe 5 or 6 years ago, we started to do, and interestingly, one's going to be coming up in a few months, but every 3 years we do kind of a goal setting, and what's our goal mission for the next 3 years. And then when that 3 years comes up, we reflect back and how did we perform and what's coming up next. And that's something that the first time we did it was kind of the brainchild of maybe only a very small handful of people. This year, we're going to be broadening that out and getting much more feedback on sort of where we should be going, and broadening out the type of questioning and broadening out the type of perspective that we're going to be collecting in terms of shaping those goals. And we've also begun doing more kind of monthly all agency check-ins where we try to report news and things that are going in and collect feedback. And we definitely, I feel like, have more structured and even unstructured times where we share news and try to get people together to report on good news and bad news, but mostly good news, and share information about what's coming up, and trying to be as communicative as we can. But set that kind of 3-year cycle of goal setting, I think, has helped keep us on track with where we need to go. And just to be clear, that goal setting is not 100% revenue thing. It's about all right, so revenue and internal development, and goals and values and that kind of thing, unrelated to just revenue growth. And
that's why everybody needs to be involved.
That's correct. Yeah, and I feel like if I'm to be very honest with myself and with you, I think the first time we did it, it was intended to feel like it was for everybody. It was probably only a couple people that worked on it based on trying to ascertain what's been important for people and where we kind of want to go. And it really is beneficial for that kind of planning to engage a lot of people in the process, which is something we're going to do more of this year as over the next handful of months, we move towards that next goal setting time period that we're working on.
So to cap that off, it sounds like you had a few leaders go off of potential assumptions, but then as you found out, getting more people involved, it actually just helped made your goals even better.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And I feel like we've also been, over the past handful of years, we've been able to, through acquisition, not just the outside partners, but the people that become part of the internal group. Mm-hmm. What's been amazingly helpful and educational is that new people bring in a perspective that maybe is different than the one that I've had, being at the one place for 20 years. And I think that engaging new people in the process, assuming that those people are that cultural match, and that's a big part of, I think, finding the right acquisition. Mm-hmm. It's an invaluable way to not only grow from a standpoint of revenue and people and that kind of thing, but you get to really bring in a variety of perspective and approach and kind of a thought process that becomes part of the tapestry of where the agency goes next. And I think that's one of the best parts of the acquisitions and the mergers and whatnot that we've done. Is just, again, it goes back to the people. We don't look to, it's nice to onboard the accounts and the revenue, but it's really about what the people bring to the table. And that's another good example of when mergers, acquisitions become part of helping the agency grow, not just from a revenue standpoint.
What would you say to agencies that aren't considering growing through mergers or acquisitions?
I'm glad that you asked, because if I was to reflect back a little bit on the experiences that I've had at the agency with, and there have been a couple. So there's two ways to answer the question. When it comes to agencies that would be considered quote unquote competition, I have lunch with agency people all the time, quote unquote competitors. You never know. I mean, it's, yeah, we may be going up against them in a pitch one day, but that type of networking and kind of the development of personal relationships becomes, you never know where it's going to lead. And it may lead nowhere, but it may lead to one day a partnership, or it may lead one day to something where the two become one kind of thing. I also I've learned a lot from just talking with people who are in the business of doing acquisitions. And what I learned from them, just kind of informally, has been things that have helped us think about the right way and what are the right things to look for when it comes to acquisitions. And I would definitely encourage agencies who have not thought about that to at least engage with folks who do that for a living. It's educational, and you never know where it may lead. And I think it's a really good way to be introspective about yourself as an agency, but really to let somebody else who's an expert in that form of matchmaking maybe give you things to think about, and maybe it leads to something that ultimately betters your agency. And so those are the two things. I think it's really kind of your own networking, but recognizing that there are people out there that do that for a living, that are good at it for a reason, and being open-minded to hearing out what type of opportunities are there.
And then if they haven't done M&A before, acquired an agency, maybe they have a few partners. What's the bright side of going into the acquisitions for them?
Yeah, I mean, the bright side of going into acquisition, yeah, it definitely, if you're bringing on accounts and revenue, nothing wrong with that. That's a good thing. I think that if there are people that you meet through partnership that make you better as a whole than you otherwise would be without them, and you're honest with yourself, say, hey, these people maybe add to us in a way that we maybe had thought we were pretty solid, but here are people with experiences and background and learnings and teachings that we didn't know about. I think being open-minded to understanding the way that adding people, not just accounts, but adding people to your family, strengthen the whole. And I think I would say we have probably talked to or heard about or chatted through or inquired about or was inquired to about many, many more opportunities than we ultimately decided to act on. But it's really like anything else with kind of these sort of things. As with business development, you have to pitch to, you have to reach out to 100 to talk to 10 to win one. And it's the sort of thing where I think that it's part of your, if acquisition strategy or looking for that kind of partner orientation is something that you're open-minded to as an agency, and I personally think you should be. You shouldn't go into it thinking that I'll talk to one, and if that doesn't work out, well, then it's definitely not the right fit. it's something that it's part of the process. I think if you're open-minded to looking to grow your agency through partnership or acquisition, it's not going to be like, here's the first one. Well, that didn't work out. I guess it's not right for us. I mean, it's just something that becomes part of, trial and error and learning till you find that right fit.
So I want to go into the partner or deal opportunities you guys are looking for to drive growth.
A lot of the early partnership opportunities that led to then some form of merger or acquisition had a lot to do with the bringing on of a skill set or a knowledge base in a particular industry. So in the past we have a niche, a relatively interesting niche experience. One of the niches we work in recruitment marketing. So we're not recruiters, but we actually help organizations who are looking to recruit employees into their organization align their recruitment brand with whatever their corporate brand is. Sometimes we are actually doing the corporate brand, and then we're doing the recruitment. Sometimes we just do align the recruitment brand. We've brought in one or two times individuals that were a fit where we were bringing on that expertise in that niche industry. It was a perfect fit for both sides. And so there have been examples where, again, the partnerships have been a byproduct of the people with the industry knowledge. I think now moving forward, a lot of the partnerships that we have, and that maybe the next acquisition is it may still come with an industry niche that we're looking to grow in, and there's a critical mass of people who have experience in professional services or higher education, or very possible. But I think because of the way that the agency world's evolving and marketing in general is evolving, probably looking towards who are doing things in the digital space and or the strategic space. So I think instead of it just being an industry-based approach, it's also a marketing discipline type of approach that maybe we're keeping our eyes open for, if that makes sense, because of how quickly our industry is evolving and just seeing where those type of partnership opportunities may be.
So as a full service agency, you probably will probably have some agency owners that are focused on some industry expertise or specific service capabilities. So if they're listening out there, what specifics could you give on that in case somebody wanted to reach out to you?
Yeah, so we are probably, as an agency that's always been proudly full service, no matter, full service in 1999 is different than what it means in 2019. A lot of our growth has come in areas related to a need for extra specialization in marketing automation and orientation around data. And how does that enhance our ability to put together not only comprehensive strategic plans, but comprehensive digital plans for our clients? And so, we do all those with a straight face. I can tell you, we do all of that. But I think going back to what I chatted about regarding plateaus, to get to those next plateaus, you have to keep thinking, okay, well, where's the industry going in these areas, and who are people we're not working with right now, or where do we need to get better in 1 to 5 years to make sure that when a client knocks on our door and says, do you do X, then we could say, yeah, not only are we doing it, but we're doing it better than anybody else you're going to be able to talk to. And I think those next partnerships, again, they're definitely tied to industry niches, but I think some of those marketing specialties that are going to be the parts of the campaigns of the future.
Okay. And then in terms of agency size or revenues, do you have employee size? Do you have preferences there?
No, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, we've partnered with firms that have specialty niches that are many-fold bigger than us. And we've done it with folks that are 1 or 2 people. And I think it goes back to being, our philosophy is you be open-minded on that. See where it goes. I mean, it's something where, at the end of the day, if we work with the partner and the client has $10 and we're getting $4 and they're getting $6, well, it's $4 more than we had the day before. So it's kind of like, I think that we tend to be very open-minded in terms of if a partnership works for all involved, including the client, well then, okay, great, let's consider it. And for that reason, my answer when I tell you is there a particular size, I mean it genuinely. I mean, sometimes it's a larger partner, sometimes it's a smaller partner, and you never know which one's going to lead to the next merger or acquisition.
What can that listener do to put themselves in an advantageous situation where you are open and interested in talking to them about an opportunity together? How can they position themselves or make it appealing for you guys?
Well, listen to your podcast for one. I think is the obvious thing. We just have it's interesting. Most of the relationships that we've had have been born out of a particular opportunity. So a lot of times if somebody reaches out to us, it'll be like, we have a particular client opportunity, either a client or a pitch, that we feel like together we have enough complementary offerings, skill sets that would make the value proposition that we would offer to a client or to a prospect better.
Okay.
And so we really do, when a firm reaches out to me, again, going back to the fact that I'm largely a revenue or a business development person, when a firm reaches out to me, when there's something that there clearly feels like there's something where that could be there from a personal level, but also a complementary service standpoint, I kind of tuck it away and I keep it in mind. And when that opportunity comes up for a client or a pitch opportunity, I'll say to our team, hey, maybe I remember I talked to this group and maybe we might be better off if we go in it together. And correspondingly, when an outside group says, I love what you've done I looked at your website, I love what you did in X, Y, and Z campaign, we have an opportunity that we feel like what you do would be a nice complement to what we do. Sometimes we go for it. And I think to answer your question, oftentimes it's kind of rooted in maybe that a specific opportunity where we're testing another relationship. You test it out, you see how it goes, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And I think for anybody who may be listening who has that same type of mindset, we're always kind of keeping our minds open to where there's a way to kind of grow in a mutually beneficial manner. And that's not everybody thinks that way. That's totally fine. But it's kind of, that's more of the mindset that we have. And again, it doesn't change the fact, to be very clear, that the majority of what we do is still, we don't use or need outside partners, but we're open to it. We're always looking to make new friends.
Sweet. So how can our listener get in touch with you, Paul?
We're abccreative.com. It's a cool, I like the brand personality that we kind of put off on it. It's very much about our people and about our clients. And being a revenue guy, it's not too hard to find my contact information on the website. So, anybody who's kind of, who maybe is hearing this and they kind of feel, hey, it's kind of, we have clients from Maine to Alaska. So it's kind of like we're sort of all over the place geographically. I'm kind of that point person who initiates conversations, and I'm always looking to chat with people who are and network with people who are in our industry. So.
Sweet. Awesome, Paul. Cool. Thanks for having you on the Build, Buy, Sell Agency podcast.
I enjoyed it, and I appreciate the fact that you invited us on today.
Hey, no problem, Paul. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to our Agency Leaders series on the Build, Buy, Sell Agency podcast. Please contact our guests from the links in the episode's show notes if you think there is an opportunity to work together. I recommend mentioning you found them through this podcast episode to catch their attention. Now, if you run a mid-size agency whose bread and butter are mid-market clients, and you are interested in divestment, exploring your exit options, or driving accelerated growth via strategic collaboration with complementary agency partners, then you may be an amazing fit for our agency network, Unite Digital. Please go to unite.digital/apply to schedule a live discovery call with me so I can understand your goals for your agency and yourself, as well as share the vital benefits of operating within our network at Unite Digital to ultimately determine if you could be a fit to join and thrive within our agency network.